Starting soon. Don't think you can see it yet, but just in case. mic. Gonna do our last check here. Make sure everything's working. And we gonna do it. Seems a touch on the quiet side, but we'll make it work. All right. Let's go. Oh, I need to promote it. Oops. One moment. Okay. And host. I don't know if you ever do this. You go to Facebook for something like super specific. You're like, oh, I need to post this one thing. And then you get there, you're like, oh, there's a notification. Oh, this group said something. Oh, there's something over here. And then all of a sudden you're like, oops, I'm spending my time doing stuff I'm not supposed to be doing. It's me. That's what happens. All right. We are good to go. So I want to give a little context in terms of what I'm doing here. I think you have, well, if you followed any of the previous live streams, you will have seen the past graphics that I've created. So this is for a church that I'm doing a yearly or a year-long series graphic campaign for them. We're doing it's a read through the Bible in a year. And so each of these hexagons represents a different week. Also did a graphic for Christmas. And so this is the graphic for Christmas. What we wanted to do is we wanted to keep the hexagon going. The hexagon actually is part of something quite a bit larger. Actually, it's kind of fun timing. I just got in the mail from them some stickers. You can see these down in the little camera. So they're little hexagon stickers. You can see there's God's story. That's the overarching, the name of it. This is Rebel Prophet. This is Tough Texts. So there's that one. This is one actually we illustrated in a past live. And so they're printing each of these out as stickers, and then you can put them all together and it forms this overarching or this larger map, which is pretty fun. So that came the other day, perfect timing actually, and it was a really fun thing to get in the mail. So on top of that, we had a Christmas graphic and an Easter graphic as part of what I was going to be doing so that we could keep everything within the same visual theme. So this visual here, Jesus has come. This was the Christmas graphic. I think it's probably pretty clear that this would be for Christmas. So now what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be creating something for Easter, and it's going to have to maintain the same hexagon. So we have this set up here. I'll get rid of our starting soon layer. So this is what I have. This is what I have to work with. I felt a little bit stumped, to be honest with you. I have designed a lot of Easter graphics over the years, and that means that sometimes it's actually really difficult to come up with ideas that you feel like are not necessarily like new and innovative, but how do I keep representing the visual of Easter, Good Friday, Palm Sunday in some cases? You know, most churches that I've been at have sort of vaguely celebrated it, but it hasn't been like a promotional element. So what we're doing for this graphic is we're going to do one graphic to rule them all. And it's going to be a Good Friday, or it's going to be Palm Sunday. It's going to be Good Friday, and it's going to be Easter. A different team is running the Good Friday service. So I don't think the visuals are going to be quite as critical in terms of like they're going to have their own, vibe going. But what I'm going to create, what we had talked about is creating one graphic that works with all of them. So that we don't have all these different graphics that we're having to manage. Many years ago, I found a graphic from a church, actually a church I used to work at, Mariners Church, down in Irvine in Southern California. Mariners Church. I'm going to see if I can find the graphic and show it to you. Oh, there it is. How about that? So one of the things that is one of the challenges, I would say, that a lot of church communicators, designers, etc. face is this tension of people seeing a graphic that they like and then just like, oh, my mouse is controlling the cursor. What is happening right now? I've never had this happen before. This is incredible. So I can go on a layer with my... Stop it. Oh my goodness. Okay. Sorry, I didn't know that was going to happen. Oh, and then, wow. All right, me learning new stuff here. Apparently the iPad is connected as a extension of the display, and so the mouse just rolled on over. So now the question is, how do I get to my downloads folder? Okay, so beyond just old guy learning new things. So one of the tensions that you run into working in the church is that you are going to you're going to be presented with some tricky stuff. Somebody's going to like a graphic, they're going to like a visual, and they're going to say, just copy it. So this is the graphic that we liked. You can see, parts of it. So it starts bare branches, and then as it moves along, more and more foliage is added, and then eventually it's flowers that are blooming. Super cool. I love a visual that tells a story, and this one tells a story from death to life. I think it's really powerful. Now, we're going to use this as conceptual inspiration, but this will not be the final graphic that we're going to land with, because we're not supposed to be doing that. We're not supposed to be just taking work from other people and using it as our own. So I wanted to start here because I think this is an important thing to watch happen. What does it look like to appropriately be inspired by the work of other people and then integrate some of those concepts into the work that we're creating, but we're creating it for the specific context that we're serving in? And so in this instance, this is Easter, and now we're going to go over to our graphic. And one of the things that we had talked about is having vines cover the background. Because again, the primary graphic here is going to be this. It's going to be Who is God? That's the name of their series or not even series, but that's the name that they're applying to each of the different weeks of Palm Sunday, or I guess different services, Palm Sunday, Good Friday, and Easter. So we're starting here. And then we're going to do vines in the background. And so what I'm starting with here is this super rough sketch that I threw together in Illustrator. Part of why I threw it together in Illustrator is it gave me a little bit more flexibility. I'm just better with the tool. And so I drew out some vines. I laid out generally the who is God, and then we're going to start building with the reference point of the graphic from Mariners in the back of our minds as the thing that's driving the transition. And so what it's going to look like when we're done, I mean, hopefully, and we'll see if we get there. I mean, this is going to be probably a longer illustration session than, like, I'm not going to finish it on this stream, is I guess what I'm getting at. So what we're going to break it up into is thirds. So essentially this third and so over here is going to be palms. Over here is going to be like, this is the Good Friday section. So it's just going to be the rough branches. And then over here is going to be life. And this is the part where we have a lot more, leaves, we have flowers, we have whatever it is that we decide to interject into this section. But this breakdown is going to be sort of visually helpful for me to remember which section is which. I'm actually going to clean this up a touch because I always love adding notes directly onto the work because just when you get into the details of it, it's really easy to lose sight of where you're going. So I'm going to scoot this one over a touch so that we're pretty close to the thirds here. It doesn't have to be absolute thirds. It can be just what a good breakdown feels like. Part of me is tempted to line it up with the edges of the hexagon, but I like the overlay a little bit, the interplay of those things. All right, so where I'm going to start is I'm going to start by illustrating over the who is God. I'm going to trace that. I already have my hexagon as part of the drawing itself. But what that'll do is that'll help me know how much refinement or how much resolution I need to add to the vines behind the hexagon plate. So this is where we're going to start, and now we just get drawing. So I'm going to go with my black ink. So, if you were here on the previous stream, you will have remembered some of the iPad saga. So I got the iPad Air that I had purchased was in fact faulty. And so after it took the second time of taking it into support where they replaced it. So that was fantastic. So now I'm back working on the iPad Air, which is an adjustment of an experience a little bit, but it's getting the job done. All right, I'm going to lighten this so that I can actually see what I'm doing in terms of colors and outlines. And then I'm checking my messages, making sure nothing's broken. All right, so now we just get to it. Oh dear, I'm on the wrong layer. There we go. So again, with the character of this, really of this whole series, I'm not looking for the most precise tracing job here. This isn't designed to be a perfect replication of the font. This really is designed to be a hand-drawn piece. And so one of the things that I find to be really interesting when you think about illustration, often you think about precision, you think about refinement, you think about cleaning up lines. There was a season for me where I would start illustrating this way, and I would see that these lines aren't straight. So then I would go back through and I would essentially edit the line work that I had created. And as I'm editing the line work, I'm like, what am I doing? Like, I'm stealing the kind of the organic look of the illustration. It would have been better for me to just do this in a different piece of software, just do it in Illustrator instead. And so what I've decided to do with the way I approach illustration in general is just lean into those imperfections, lean into the things that are kind of charming elements about illustration. And what it's done is it's really helped lead me to a much more like whimsical style. And so for this series, the original brief was we want something that's like it's like a storybook, it's like a narrative that we're going through together as a congregation. And we want it to be really accessible and engaging for people. And so just like that, the imperfections of the style begin to add value to what it is that we're creating. So that's what we're doing. I don't love this brush, might be a touch too thick for what I'm trying to accomplish here, but in that sense, I will go back through and clean it up. But we're just getting the first lines on paper here, in a way. There we go. So there's a couple of you that are hopping in. I'm really curious how you guys are doing on your Easter graphics. Are you finished? Have you already kind of landed your look and your feel and your different promotional pieces? Or are you still wondering, what's our Easter series going to be? I've had both years. I've had years where we had made the decision about what Easter was going to be very early on, and I've had years. I need to turn this layer off. This is making it harder. Oh yeah, look at that. It's revealing some of the mess here. I got to redo that. But yeah, I've had years where we had a really clear sense of what we were trying to accomplish early, and I have had years where that is not the case. So I'd love to know where you guys find yourselves in terms of a graphic for Easter. I'm also curious, for some churches, they have this pressure of feeling like they need to innovate is the word I keep using, but that's not necessarily what I mean. We have to have a different approach. We have to tell Easter from, a different perspective. We got to tell it from Judas's perspective this year. Oh, it's got to be let's hear it from Peter's vantage point, and we almost make the story more convoluted because we feel like we have to present it from a different angle. But then there are other churches that are a little bit more traditional in the way they approach it. And they say, no, we're telling the story of Easter. It's the same story every year. We're going to tell it the same every year. I'm curious where your church falls in that, in that spectrum of things too. Having been in the context where we do change it every year in terms of the perspective, I lean away from that. I like the more traditional approach personally, because it is the same story. And, something I've actually learned from content creation, which has been a surprise to me. When I started really kind of leaning into creating content, I didn't expect to learn stuff from it. I thought it was just like, here's a painful process that I'm adding to my life. I just have to produce high volume content, and that's all it is. One of the big lessons that I've learned is that people aren't listening all the time. Like, you could post the same video twice, and you're likely not going to get redundancy in terms of viewership. Like, that kind of stuff it's not as common as you think it is. And so a lot of times people are like, oh man, I just keep saying the same thing over and over again. It's like, right, because you're saying it to different people. It's almost like each time you post, you're posting at a different conference, or you're speaking at a different conference. Totally different set of people are in attendance. That's more of what it's like when you're posting content. I think Easter's the same way. Yeah, you're going to have people that have been there for, 4 Easters, 5 Easters, 10 Easters. But you also have to keep in mind that there have been 51 other sermons that have happened between this Easter and last Easter. And so even if the message that you present is the same one, nobody's going to remember that. Nobody's going to have the same level of angst that you are when you pull out the same manuscript from last year. So I lean more towards tell the same story every year. But whatever. I mean, that is not the call that you get from the communications seat. The call that you get is, how are we going to design it? So it goes. I'm actually going to pin the question, because one of the things I'm realizing, let's see, does your church already have, let's see. If you already finished your church's Easter graphic, and then I'm going to pin it. There we go. Great. All right. We are moving along here. The first few things that I illustrate whenever I'm doing a session are always, they're a little bit rough. And so it takes a little bit of time to warm up, kind of get the muscles moving the way that they need to. Reminds me a little bit of, stretching for sports. There's probably value in me taking the time to do like a warm-up sketch. Those have been helpful for me in the past. I'm just rolling with it this time, but that's one of the things that creates the need to go back through and do a little bit of the cleanup work, is the lines just aren't behaving exactly the way I need them to. Though, to be honest, I think tracing letters is a good warm-up sketch, because then it puts you in a position to be able to do your freehand illustration a little bit more effectively once you've kind of warmed up a little bit, because I have a guide here, and so that makes it real easy to know if I'm where I need to be or not. So maybe I've built it into the process. How about that? All right. Getting close. This font is part of the overarching look. So what we did here, I built a brand kit, basically. So this is kind of similar to what you would do if you have a brand for your organization, for your church. I built a branding guide for the series itself, in part because I wanted to make sure that I could empower the communications director at this church to be able to just run with stuff and not have to continually bring me into the conversation. I mean, if they didn't want to. I love leveraging outsourced help for stuff. I think that's a real smart strategy. I think one of the big kind of trends that I'm seeing in churches is having fewer and fewer executors on the team, and instead having what I call like a conductor. And basically what they do is they leverage the outsourced talent for the different projects that they have. And so that's what this situation is. The communications director is not a graphic designer or an illustrator. And so that's great. Leverage the people and, coordinate everything. So then for me, what I view my responsibility to be as I work with them is to set them up for as much success as possible. So we created a brand guide for this. I basically went through and I said, this is what the illustrations look like. Here are some illustrated elements that you can use and apply to different elements of your promotional material. Here's like what a banner would look like, hand-drawn, stuff like that. And so it gave them the flexibility to design and print whatever they needed without having to say, oh, we need another thing. Oh, we need another thing. I want to help them move quickly, because it's how churches move. They move quickly. So this font is a part of that brand guide. And so that's why there haven't been a lot of questions, which is fantastic in terms of what font should we use. So we've already made that decision. Whenever you can front load a decision, you're in good shape, because you really help speed yourself up a lot. It becomes no longer a question of what font do we use. Now it just becomes a matter of, okay, here's the font. Let's go. Move on to the next thing. You want to save your decision making for the things that are actually complicated, the things that you actually need to make decisions on. That's a really helpful way to not put yourself in a frustrating position as a communications leader. I know for me, most of the time when I was grumpy, it was because of decision fatigue more than anything. Like, good gracious, we got to make a decision about this too? Like, can we stop making decisions about things that we can make one decision and have this always be the practice? So whenever you have the opportunity to create some sort of a standard decision, even in little things like this is the font we're using for Easter and everything's going to be using it, that it just makes it a lot easier. This was a really helpful, to build the brand guide on this was really helpful, because I knew that it was going to be spanning over 9 different series graphics. Man, that made it so easy. Thinking about designing a year in advance, like that's a real helpful thing. It just saves you so much time to not have to think about well, what's this next series going to look like? What's this next series going to look like? So whenever you have a cohesive theme for the year, I think it's a real big win. I think this is the second. So this is the second time I've actually been like the primary designer or artist or whatever on this. I did this once at a church that I served where it was read through the Bible in a year, and we did like a Route 66 theme. This is a read through the Bible in a year, and it's God's story, so it's a real storybook kind of vibe, which I think is super fun. And then I was part of a church that did this, but I wasn't the primary graphic designer, creative on the project. But I got to see the same kind of thing where they put together a big book and it was read through it together as a church, and some of our series graphics would line up with it and all that kind of stuff. I think whenever you can package something as a big theme like that and then build some like quiet diversity within that, man, it lets you get so far ahead. I remember we were designing something for the whole year. It was Route 66. And I remember we got ahead on it, and I had everything for the next year done in November of the previous year. I just remember like stopping, because it was a real busy season. Obviously, you're trying to get so many things done in advance. I remember stopping and thinking to myself, we're going to be able to invest so much on all of these different like things that come down the road. We have, a big event comes. I don't have to worry about balancing it with our series graphic promotion or create. Like, this is crazy. So I love it. I think whenever you can get ahead like that, it's a win. All right, so here we got this done. Who is God? I think it looks clean. It's about where I would want it to be. Okay, so I'm going to go in and throw a little bit of color here. I don't know what my final colors are going to be. I do have my palette here. Let's go with a dark green border, and then I'll do gold on the inside. I think that's kind of a fun look. Let's just start there. I'm just going to lay it out so that I can show where I'm going to be blocking off with the vine work that's coming, because I know that's coming next, and I want to make sure I have a really good sense of where I do and don't need to be adding vines. That's going to be important. So the easy thing here is that I'm just going to create I'm just going to color in the outline, and then that's going to let me drop a fill color inside. So I actually enjoy this part. I was talking to somebody yesterday, one of the churches that I'm helping. They have a new designer, and I'm meeting with them and kind of helping them get up to speed on just some of the practices, like the tips and tricks that help get you to be faster and more effective as a designer in the church. I found that it's different than like if you work at a studio. And so in that conversation, one of the things that I told him is that you want to be careful about automating every part of your creative process, because sometimes what you end up doing is you end up automating out the things that you like. And so in Procreate, what you can do is you can draw a circle and you can, drop a fill in there, and that just saves you time. Well, I actually find it to be kind of a therapeutic process to actually color in the lines here. So in a way, what I enjoy doing is I enjoy building my own coloring book in the illustration and then spending some time coloring it in. It gives me time to think both about, life in general, but it also gives me time to think about what it is that I'm illustrating next. So right now I'm thinking about the fact that, okay, we're going to have a dark green border. We're going to have gold on the inside. What color do I want the text to be? Well, I'll probably go with the dark green again to see how that looks. I want to allude to growth. I think that's important and valuable, even though the overarching graphic will encompass Palm Sunday and Good Friday. It will also have Easter. And so I'm going to start here with just, roughing out what I think is going to be a good color palette for this, or a good color combination. We already have a color palette defined. Again, talking about the value of making these decisions ahead of time. The whole color palette is applied throughout the entirety of the series. So what's really nice is that all the visuals that have come out all look like they belong, because they do. They're all part of the same aesthetic. They have the same, look and feel because of the line work and everything. I even went as far as saying this is the brush that's being used on this project. So I found a brush that I like better than the one I'm using right now, but it's part of the brand guide. So I'm going back to the old one in order to make sure that it matches. Okay. I don't like coloring a giant field like that. So I'm using automation well here. And then the text I'll probably make green as well. but that's for a bit later on. So now we're going to get into what I consider to be the most complicated part of the project. Now I'm going to start drawing the line work. So again, for those of you who are joining more recently, so this is going to be vines across the background. And I'm having it divided up into 3 sections. We have vines over here on the left. These are going to be, instead of leaves, they're going to have palm fronds, which I know is like technically incorrect, but I mean, it's Palm Sunday. What are you going to do? Then over here in the middle, it's going to represent Good Friday. So in the middle, we're going to have just branches, and I'm going to try to draw them in a way that makes them look like they don't have life. So there's not going to be any leaves. They're going to have either a gray or a brown kind of a shade to them. And then on the right is when we're going to start having a little bit more life. And so again, the inspiration here was a graphic from Mariners. I don't think, oh yeah, no, I had that in the, I'll show you here. So this is the inspiration graphic that we're working off of. So you can see this death on the left, and then to the right, we have life. I think it's fantastic. I'd mentioned earlier, I'm just a big fan of graphics that tell a story, and you can look at that graphic and you can understand the concept of from death to life. And so the other thing I want to kind of call out again is we're not looking to just copy that graphic. We're looking to say, what is it that inspired this graphic to be what it is? What is it that really that's really driving the thinking behind the graphic? That's what we're trying to accomplish. So we're going to see if we can pull that off. So I sketched out some lines here in Illustrator because it was a faster way for me to do it. Brought them into Procreate, and I want to keep talking because I'm intimidated by this part of the process. But too bad, so sad. We got to get it done. Let's see here. I'm going to drop the opacity here so that I'm not stuck wondering if I drew a line or not. So the original idea was to have 2 sides of each vine. So as an example, I'm going to have a vine and I'm going to have, a line on each side. I don't know how that's going to end up looking, but we're going to start with that as our idea. So one problem I feel like I'm going to run into here is actually real estate on this iPad, which was a little bit unexpected. Let me shuffle some things around here. Always make sure that your desk is clean so that you can adjust as you need to while you're working. He said to himself, wishing that his desk was clean. All right, I'm going to shift this a little bit so that I can work vertically on my iPad. I think you can see that down there. So now I'm basically working portrait. Oh, that's going to mess you guys up. Well, I'll do this. I'm going to keep it landscape. There we go. But on my desk, it's portrait. So you can see that I'm working on it with a little bit of a different intention. So it's still going to mess you up in that sense. But what it does is now it gives me a run to be able to draw a single line the whole way down. So these are the practical, oh, now my menus are all shifted. This is going to be an adventure. So here we go. Let's see if we can figure this out. Okay, so I'm on my vines layer. I'm going to rename it now so I don't forget. Let's go to keyboard, and I'm going to type sideways here. Vines. Where's my... Okay, great, did it. That feels like a minor victory. So I anticipate this is going to go exceptionally well because so far, so good. For those of you who are jumping in, I want to hear from you. Have you already finished your Easter graphic for this year? That's the big question that's on my mind. How is that coming for you? And if you have, what's the name of your Easter series? All right, so already I know a problem I'm experiencing. So this is too thick. So I think what's going to happen is the line work is too prominent. So you can see the Who is God portion. That's not nearly as strong in terms of the line work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop down my line work to like 5. I'm going to save this setting, and then let me see how that looks. Because what we're doing, yeah, that's better. So what I'm trying to balance here is the focus of this graphic isn't on the vines. The vines are actually a supporting element. So the vines are telling the story. They're telling the story of Palm Sunday, Good Friday, and Easter. But the vines themselves are not the most prominent piece. The title of the graphic is the most prominent piece. Who is God? That's the question that we're really asking here. That's the question that's going to be addressed in the series. And frankly, that's a more important question than what the vines tell us, because the vines just tell us the idea of from death to life or palms to death to life, but there needs to be some contextualization in that, and that's where the question of who is God becomes more prominent. So visually, that's a benefit of having this crest. Again, this is part of a larger series. It's called Who is God? And so this crest drives everything in the series. And so that's why we're starting with that. We have that sort of limitation in a good way, but that's a limitation that we have. And so I want to make sure that the vines don't become so prominent that they overshadow everything else that's happening in the piece. So with that, I need to make that decision on line work. So my line work needs to be thinner. And then when I color it in and we have a color field behind it and all of that, that's going to be an element that contributes to the visual prominence of it. But line work here needs to be a little bit thinner than it was originally. And then I also need to try to make these vines not too thick, because if they're too thick, again, you're going to get into an issue of how prominent they are. All right, I'm digging it. I didn't have to be as nervous about this as I have been. I've really been wrestling with this piece for, probably 2 weeks now, in terms of just thinking through, how am I going to present this? How am I going to visualize this? I usually don't, I don't know. I usually don't wrestle with things quite as much as I have with this one. And so this has been a tension. So I'm just going to cap it off here. And we'll go through and kind of clean that up in a little bit. The other thing that I know is going to be happening is I'm going to be spending some time really refining the connection points, because a branch doesn't just pop out, but that's going to be a little bit of a cleanup part of the process. Same thing with the ends of the vines. I'm probably going to go something like this, so there's a little bit of depth to it, so it looks kind of like it's a clipped branch or something like that, but we'll see. All right, so this one's going to be tricky. We're going to go here. We're going to go under, over, under, over. So part of the reason that I wanted to draw out this sketch of the vines is because I got lost right now. And so I need to go back over here and I need to erase some of this, because I do want to go on the path that I originally created. I think it's a good path. Okay. Now I need to see if I can, how am I going to do this? So this already needs to move. These dips out beyond need to be a little bit wider, so that I can, let's see, like this, because I need to get both parts of the branch. So this one can be close. Yeah, perfect. This one, that's actually probably going to be okay. Okay, and then we're going to curve it up and then cap it off. All right. I'm gonna layer this one now, because I want to just sort of see how it's working. So this is going to go under first. So I'm going to go under here. And then I actually want this other branch to go over. So this guy's going to go over. This is really, the reason I'm doing this at this point is because I want to make sure I'm not getting lost. If I go back, if I draw all the vines and then I have to come back through, my concern is that I will get overwhelmed and I will forget what things belong where. And so this is really part of like a phase 2 of my drawing. But I have to, rather than saving it all for one big pass, you'll do a sketch, then you'll do a line work, then you'll do color, then you'll do, this is one where I have to break it. I have to break into this phase a little bit early, just to make sure that I'm not losing sight of what things are supposed to be happening. And so this area will be a little bit more resolved visually than the rest, but that's okay. So this one's going to go under again. It's funny how much like spatial stuff exists in drawings like this. I always think of spatial as like 3D, and it's like, oh, it's very complex, blah, blah, blah. I'm literally drawing a vine that's wrapping around something, another vine, and it's like, oh, this is hard. This is tricky. And so this one goes over. But it's fun. It's a fun challenge, I think. Great. Okay, and then I got to clean that up. I don't know what that guy's doing. All right, that's looking pretty sweet. And so on these ones, I don't need to go back through. I'll do it just since I'm here, and I'll just kind of show you what I'm, thinking for the long term here. So long term, I'm going to go back through and kind of adjust these branches because these are going to need to be, that's more of how a branch is going to behave, This one needs to get cleaned up a little bit too. But again, something I was alluding to earlier in the stream was the imperfections are a part of what add character and charm to this style of illustration. So for me, it's an advantage. I don't say it's an advantage. It's actually something I lean into. Maybe I'll put it that way. I'm taking it and using it as an advantage because I want it to be something that really is beneficial to the final piece. So if I refine this too much and I get too precise and too exact, I actually end up stealing a lot of the character and the charm from the piece itself. I find that having imperfections in an illustration style like this actually adds a ton of value to the final piece. So if you're an illustrator and you're like, I don't know if this is working, I'm not really good at the refinement work, that might be okay, depending on the type of thing that you're trying to communicate. I always like this with kids ministry. Man, it's so fun to work with kids ministry when it comes to illustration, because if it's too refined, it doesn't actually feel like a kids ministry piece anymore. And so you can really lean into some of these things and really you elevate the charm quite a bit. So that's a good thing if you're approaching it that way. All right, I'm going to drop this back on my end to be horizontal because I can really negotiate it here now. So this was, let me actually double check here. I think this was a split off that I had. Yep. So this is another split off. So we're going to do that. We're going to do another part of that. And I'm great if things go off the page. I think that, again, is going to add a lot of charm. And it's just how vines work. So one thing I'm already beginning to think about, this section of the illustration is actually going to be defying the laws of nature in a weird way, because I'm planning on putting palm fronds on here. So I need to begin thinking through and negotiating, how in the world am I going to put palm fronds on this portion? I need it to be vine work throughout the three panels so that everything feels like connected. If I have a bunch of huge palm fronds, it's going to feel weird because then the next two are going to be vines. And so in that sense, it's not going to make a lot of sense. So that's something that's on my mind already, is how do I create this in a way, not even how do I create it in a way, what am I going to do, basically, is really where my mind is going. So what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to, I want to leave open space, but I also want to fill open space. So it's a little bit of a tension. I want a vine to be traveling through that. I like this area right here being available and having space for me to add some palm fronds. But I also want to make sure that I don't have these like huge chunks. So like right here, if I don't add a vine right here, it's just going to feel really empty. So those are the things that I'm really trying to negotiate here in the layout. And so there's benefit in having these existing lines because they tell me generally where I'm thinking about things. But as you can see here, I'm changing the way that those lines function. It's a little thicker than I want it to be. Oh, I like the line so far. Whew. Every time I'm drawing a line like that, I worry that I'm going to get 80% there and then like start wobbling or like the whole thing just messes up. So I'm glad I made it. I also really like the vines coming off of the vines, and so I'm going to add that here as opposed to just having another vine coming up from the bottom. Oh, still struggling with the width of these. Got it. And then in terms of the line variation, I mean, you can see here that this area here is quite a bit thicker than this area here. I love it. Personally, I think it's a fantastic element. One thing I do want to consider, though, is that the way that a plant grows, it will be wider or thicker by the base of the vine that it's coming off of, and so it will thin out as it moves along. And so I want to balance the whimsicalness or the whimsy with also a little bit of like, I don't want it to look so whimsical that's like, this is not real. Like, I don't even understand what you're talking about. So I'm going to clean this up a little bit and try to flip it. Part of that happens as I illustrate, the line tends to get thicker. That's just sort of the way that I put pressure on the pen as I'm illustrating on the iPad. So, but controlling your line weights is a real important part of illustration. I'm a big believer that it doesn't matter if you control it with like your first pass or if you control it by going back through and controlling it. So, you know, in that sense, okay, so I did it in a way that I would like it to be different. Let's make it different. Who cares? I know some are of the opinion that you're not a good illustrator if you can't control your line work on your first pass. That's just not how illustrators work. Sorry. It's like anything. Design is the same way. You don't get your perfect layout the first time you drop everything in. You got to do refinement work. You got to move stuff around. I think that's actually a big hurdle for a lot of people when it comes to creative endeavors. There's a perception that you got to be perfect, and you gotta just you have an idea in your head, and then you put it on the paper. And it's like, yeah, that's not how that goes. And so as soon as you recognize that, man, you have become free. It opens up a huge amount of freedom and peace and almost like a courage to explore. Because now all of a sudden you're like, oh, I don't have to master it on my first try. This is incredible. I can experiment. I ran into this a lot with barbecue. That was one of the first hobbies that I really leaned into. I was super afraid I was going to get it wrong. And what I learned was that a failure with barbecue was better than a win with a lot of other methods of cooking. It still tasted incredible. Yeah, it was a little drier than I wish it was. So what? It was still really good. And so that empowered me to be able to pursue pretty much every endeavor that way. So pretty good shift of mindset. Okay, I'm going to see if I can pull this off here. Can I get it right there? Oh, baby. Did it. Okay, so now this is going to be another loop-de-loop. So I'm going to have this curl go above. And then this guy is going to go, it's going to go this way, I think. Let me do it and see. This is another thing that I, talking about visualization and like spatial awareness. A lot of times it's like, oh, I don't know what should be erased. Cool, do it, erase it, and then actually just see if you did it right or not. So there are a lot of times where I'll just do it, and then if I got it wrong, I'll just redraw it. That's really freeing to be able to say, I don't have to get it right. I can just draw it, and then if I'm wrong, I'll redraw it. It's like, oh, that was easy. So right here, the vine's a little thicker than I want it to be. Great, I'm going to redraw it. Just like that, problem solved. I need it to go, not taper in quite so much. So the reason I have the hexagon layer turned on here is for this exact situation. I need to know where I can be done resolving the vines and the illustration parts that I'm working on. And so whatever happens beyond here, I mean, who cares? Like, I can draw whatever I want. And it's there, but I don't need it to be there, or like I don't have to spend time resolving that. So that for me it's almost a visual blocker to say, hey, don't worry about drawing behind here. That's okay. So that's a little thing I've been doing that's really been helpful, because in part I know where I'm going with the layout. I think that's a trick that that's a part of illustration in general that I've wrestled with. Sometimes I don't feel like I know where my layout's going or my illustration's going. You have to have a balance of that. Sometimes you need to resolve it as you're going. That's fine. Other times it's really helpful to have your anchor elements. And so that's usually what I've been focusing on is, okay, what are my anchor elements? I know that I'm going to have a big hexagon in the middle. I know I'm going to have vines somewhere, and I know it's going to be divided into thirds. Okay, that's about all I need to know in terms of these anchor elements. What is the leaf going to look like over here on this section? I don't know. I don't need to know that yet. How about the palm fronds that I've been talking about? How am I going to get those in there? I don't know. I don't know yet. But I know that I have to have this done first before I can make any of those decisions. So that's where we start. We start here. So leaving those core elements open, obviously it makes the drawing a little bit weird when you join a stream and like, what the heck is this guy doing? He's got a random hexagon with unfinished, unfilled text and these two weird bizarre lines going, top to bottom. What's happening? These are just the most important elements that I need to wrestle with and be aware of. Something that I'm going to do over here, I'm going to leave this area open. I think I'm going to put a palm frond there, and I think it'll be good to have that space open. I'm tempted to add another curl here, or I guess it would go more of like this way, but I'm going to leave it for now, and then we'll see. We'll revisit that when we get further along. All right, so we got another vine coming up here. We're going to do a curl like this. So here's another question. Obviously I'm asking the question, have you finished your Easter graphic for your church? Here's another question. Do you work in church comm? Are you an illustrator? Like, what is it that you do? What is it that has you kind of intrigued in joining this stream? I'd love to hear what kind of stuff you are a part of. If you're part of creative stuff, if you're learning to illustrate, a big part of the content that I put out on my channel is really focused on helping church communications creatives, or church creatives, grow in their skill sets, but also in their leadership, so that they can represent the ideas of creativity more effectively to church leadership. But I'm super curious, what has you joining the stream? What are you interested in? What is it that has you compelled enough to be sticking around? Thank you for doing that, by the way. It's great to see some people in here. But yeah, I'd love to get to know you all a little bit better and kind of get a sense of where you all are coming from in terms of the creative space even. Because maybe Let's Chat Church Comm isn't the best little banner here. Or maybe you're trying to figure out Easter graphics and you're like, I hope this will help. maybe it will, I don't know. Or if you don't know what to do, are you stuck on an idea? I mean, let's chat about that. What's the idea you're wrestling with? Happy to brainstorm a little bit on some of these things. I know for me, I wrestled a lot with this. I actually went back to the client that I'm working with on this, and I said, hey, I really want to. So whenever I'm working with a church, I'm always working really hard to pull off as much of the creative brain power load as possible. I want to be helpful. I want to remove work from the plate of what I know are overworked people. I mean, that was me. I couldn't describe it any more clearly. When I was serving in church comm, leading a creative team, I'm like, I don't got time for this. Like, I don't got time to invest the mental energy in developing a new look, feel, vibe, whatever. So I always try to take off as much as possible. But man, I was wrestling with this one. And so I wrote back to the client. I said, hey, do you have a couple minutes for us to just brainstorm around where you guys are going, what you want to accomplish? And it was great. It was 15-minute conversation, and we landed the plane, which was fantastic. But I get it. It is really difficult sometimes to come up with another idea for Easter. Like, it's just tricky. So if that's something that you're wrestling with, man, let me know what you're considering or thinking about in the comments, and we'll chat it out. We'll get you an answer or an idea. That's actually a large part of why I want to be doing these streams. Like, I need to get my client work done regardless. So I'm drawing a picture whether anybody's watching or not. But I find that in the midst of creative execution is a great place to talk. It's a great place to have a conversation. My mind is in a creative state, so that's kind of what I have in mind with these things. All right. I got madness happening over here. Okay. So let's see what I was thinking. We have a vine going up here. Let's start like this. Oh, that's the wrong tool. So we have a vine going up here and another part of it. And then we have another vine coming up and over. A little crosswork. I like that. Okay, and then we have a branch off that kind of goes like this. Digging that. And then we have another piece that was designed to go back over. Is kind of like like this and then back over. I feel like that. So in this space, I don't have a lot of room. I don't have a lot of space to add branches, and that's okay. But I also need to have branches because we're talking about this. This is the visualization of Good Friday, and so if I don't have any branches here, that's a problem. It's just a matter of how complex do I want to get. Maybe I'm not even sure if I like if I like this X, like the way that goes. Let's do this. I'm gonna. Oh man, of course, the first one I drew is the one I don't like, not the last one. That's fun. I'm gonna go here and let it peek into the next zone a little bit. Okay. Now I'm gonna do another X, but I'm gonna have it go further over. I don't like the back end of that. Here we go. And then I can do another one. Do I want to do... Ooh, let's do this. Yeah. Touch thicker though. Nope. Okay, so I'm going to do this one over. And then this one under. Yeah, I like that. Okay, good. And then I'm actually going to probably do here. Let's go another one. Actually, this one might just go straight out. It does need a curl though, doesn't it? All right. So we're going to go up, over, down, and then swoosh it. This needs to come more. There we go. Maybe we'll do it that way. Yep. Don't love that. At the end here. Oh, man. There we go. Oops. Okay, feeling that a little bit better. I like that. Okay. I'm going to do this one just to get a good sense as to whether or not I like where I'm going with this. So what I'm realizing is that I am going to need enough visual, like I'm going to need enough vines in this area to really make it clear that this is the Good Friday section. I don't want to lose the ability to communicate that by having too few of the vines. And so there's enough here now, I think, that we're going to be able to get that clear. And then we're going to add some more on the bottom. So I'm great with this section being a little bit more dense on the top and bottom because it has to be. You have a very limited view that you're able to do this with. The other thing that I'm realizing a little bit here is that I'm going to need to also create borders for this. So I think that probably actually will just be a separate piece entirely. And I'll just have a vine running. Oops, that's the wrong tool. A vine running, essentially the whole bottom, the whole top, etc. So just do another piece. I think that's fine. Okay. Sorry, just thinking some of these things out loud because whenever you're creating a graphic, you have to think through the holistic application. What exactly is it that I need to be doing? What are the other pieces that I'm going to need to be creating? And so sometimes you're able to create one piece, and that one piece is going to be sufficient really for everything. You just, drop like in this case, drop the who is God in the middle, and there you go. You have your slide for your PowerPoint. I don't think that's going to be the case in this one because I want to give them more real estate. And so we'll see where we go, but I'm not going to worry about maintaining a piece that can be used in each context. So Okay, so we're gonna do a couple more vines here. I want to fill up this space, so let's do a little one that goes here. And then I'm going to do a branch off here. And then we'll do another, ooh, we can get some layering stuff over here too. So let's do another branch that goes here. I really like the way that these layered ones look. I think that adds a lot of interest to the piece. And it's how vines work. I mean, vines are very much this way. Let's go. Let's go over. I don't know. It doesn't matter. Just try one. Sometimes it's faster. It's faster to do it and then undo it than it is to think about which one you want. So I'm just going to do it, try each, see which one I like better. Okay, I actually don't like either one very much, which is interesting. I think we need another layer happening. Let's see, how did we do it? Yeah, so what we did up here is we had two going. So if I have basically have a Y and then have it go through the middle of the Y, but go through both pieces. Okay, so let's do this. We're going to back it up a little bit. We're going to do one that goes to the left. And then we're going to do a big Y that comes out. And then we're going to do another piece. And ooh, I know what we can do. This will be fun. It goes here. Oh, mercy. How about that? I'm just drawing lines at this point, and it's crazy. I don't even know how I'm going to reconcile this one. That's fun. That might be too much. Okay, let's try it from over this side. So we go here, back over here, and then back up. Okay. All right, I think that'll work. So then I want this to go over. Nope. I want this to go over. So it's basically going over that junction. And then I want this to go under, which means do that. Okay, and then I'm going to cut this out just because the junction needs to be cut out anyway. And then I'm going to draw that down a little bit so it's clear. Okay. Yeah, I think that's fun. I also really like there being a lot of vines woven together in this area. I think, I don't know, when you think about the Good Friday side of it, I think there's something that's compelling about that visual. It's kind of trapping or choking maybe. I don't know. That's a little dramatic, but I think something with those visuals, the intertwinedness is it's just more complex. I think there's something about Good Friday that's more complex. It's more complex for us spiritually, just intellectually. Like it's hard. It's a real challenging, hope-filled, but also sorrow-filled, but also hope-filled. There's this tension, and I think that tension is kind of visualized when we have visual complexity. It's like you have to navigate that section a little bit more visually. So I think that's a good thing. I like that. Which makes me actually want to do a little bit more over here in terms of adding some complexity. So let's see what we can do. I don't want it to be like too complex, but I do think complex enough is a good thing. So we have a vine over here that looks like it's coming out from the bottom. And so I do need to make sure that there is something that's coming up. So let's do this. Let's go up, which is essentially what we just had, but whatever. And then let's go here. And then let's do another one. And so we'll get some, actually let's go like this. Oh yeah, let's go. Digging it. Ooh, I can make this one. that. Oh yeah, I'm digging that a lot. Okay. One thing that I like doing here, this is just sort of it's like a hyper specific concept here. But when I'm illustrating branches, I want there to be this V that happens, so like right here, you can see that V. But I like cutting this part down a little bit more. That's too much. But I like it so that it's not exactly like a parallel, because in a lot of ways what's happening is the branch does kind of widen right here. And so I like adding that little visual in there, that little adjustment, because I feel like it helps kind of communicate that there's a branch coming off. So just as I've been illustrating, that's something that popped out to me, like, oh yeah, that's interesting. I wanted to elevate it. So I'm going to do this over. That's the wrong tool. This is one of the consequences, I guess, of having, bouncing back and forth between the iPads when the one was getting repaired. They use different pencils. So my iPad Pro uses the first Apple Pencil, because I had that device for, goodness, 6 years. I don't know. I don't even know how long it's been out. And so it wasn't until the M1s came out that it felt like it made sense to upgrade. And I'm glad I did, because the old one was chugging a little bit. Well, it was chugging a lot. That's what prompted the purchase in the first place. But there was that, it made sense to upgrade at that point. But because the pencil's different, I haven't gone through and changed all the settings, because I had done that originally, but then the iPad went bad, and so I didn't want to go back through every time I got the unit back until they actually fixed it. And so they finally fixed it by replacing it, and now I haven't gone through and changed the settings. And so one of the things that's happening is this pencil has like the touch bar or whatever, and so when I'm touching it, it keeps bouncing back over to the wrong tool. So anyway, if you're wondering how does this guy keep getting on the wrong tool, that's how. Just need to go back through and change the settings. All right, so this is getting too wide here, and so I'm going to go back and I'm going to thin it out. No, it's a tricky curve. Another thing as I'm thinking about sort of the whimsical nature of the line work here and the drawing, one of the factors that can really help you keep a consistent look is using the same brush that you use for painting, using the same brush for erasing. And so what happens is it ends up maintaining the texture as you're going through and erasing. So for a season, I was using a cleaner brush when I was erasing, because I was like, no, I want it to erase consistently. And what I was finding is then I would have to go back and draw more over it. And so that's just a redundant process. And so it doesn't make sense. So now what I've started doing is I've started using the same brush. So this is the line that my brush creates. You can see there's a breakdown of it. It's inconsistent, and I love that about it. And then my eraser, you'll see, will do the same thing. So I can erase it, and it will, let me actually do this to give you a better idea. So you can see the eraser is similar in that it has those same imperfections. So now when I'm erasing, I'm actually adding character to the line, as opposed to erasing to lose character to then redraw it to add the character back in. So it's helped me really streamline both sides of the process are now working together. So that's good. Okay, I'm digging it. I think this will work. I think these are good additions to that middle section. All right, and then we're on to the last section. So this is going to be a section where we know that what's coming is a bunch of leaves, some flowers. I don't know, I could add fruit, I guess. I don't know where I'm going to go exactly with that just yet. But these are going to be long vines that have open spaces that are going to accommodate some of these additional embellishments that come. And so it's going to be a lot more similar to the first page, or the first not quadrant, the first of the triads, I guess. I don't know, the first of the triptych. It's not really a triptych, but this section on the left. Oh, not for you. Sorry. There. The section on the left. Oh, good gracious. I just turned off my iPad. Okay. There we go. Okay, sorry about that. Um, so the so the first section here, wide open spaces. The middle, very compressed, tension. And then the third section is going to be wide open spaces again, because the vines are just a platform upon which the subject matter is going to be built. So that's where we're going. So we're going to get some big vines going here, big sweeping vines. And I think I'm going to do this one shorter screen. Oh, wait, this was going to come up from here. Got it. Okay. And then another one that's going to come over here. I'm going to do a little loop-de-loo here, because I thought that was really fun on the first side. Okay, and then it's got to go over here. We're going to go straight through. How about that? All right. And then I'm going to do, oh no. It's another setting that needs to get changed. When I put my hand on the screen, sometimes it triggers undo. I have lost work that way. So that's over, that's under. Outstanding. So already I can tell I really like where this is going. A lot of times when you're in the midst of an illustration, you don't really, I'll say it this way. Illustration is really, it's really challenging at times, because the only way for you to know if what you have in your mind is going to work is doing it. And so it can be a very time intensive process. I mean, it is a time intensive process, even if you're getting it right when when you have an idea in your mind. It just takes time to illustrate. But what I find to be particularly time intensive is that you don't know if your initial, kind of sketch or build out is going to work. And so there are ways that you can optimize that. You can speed it up by, doing rough comps or rough layouts. For me, I found that I don't get a good enough picture when I'm doing a rough illustration to really give me clarity on whether or not I'm actually achieving what I want to be achieving. So I don't know. It's an interesting part of the problem. I will say, when I was serving on a staff, leading communications and the creative team, I didn't have the margin to be able to illustrate work very often. I actually developed a style that was very, very fast, a little bit more like a cartoon spot illustration. Actually, I have an example of that. That's not what I'm trying to do here. Here we go. So this is stuff that I will usually do for Lunchtime Heroes. So I have a cohort that I'm launching, and this is the guy. He's like the little guy that's like, hey, come, apply for a subscription, or not for a subscription, apply for a scholarship. This one is, hey, thanks for signing up for the Creative Bites email newsletter. So these are just little spot illustrations that are very quick to do, because this is all I was able to have time to do as a creative working on a church staff. And I love that style. So in a lot of ways, I'm very thankful that I was forced to develop something that was very fast. But in terms of creating artwork for a series graphic, man, I didn't have time for that. So this is a real joy for me to be able to invest the time on these types of projects for churches when I get the opportunity. But if you're sitting here thinking to yourself, I don't got time for this, yeah, you may be right. I don't know. The trick always is, can you do fewer things and then invest more in the few that you're doing, or do you have to sustain the volume of requests that are coming your way? And so a lot of organizations, it's sorry, we are going to keep asking, and you're going to have to keep figuring out how to do it. And the way that you figure out how to sustain that in a lot of ways, or in a lot of environments, is just going to be figure out how to get faster, simplify the work that you're doing, operate with templates more, get some ready-made stuff, through a lot of the different services or companies that are either giving away graphics or are putting out graphics that are, buy it, you're done, one-stop shop kind of things. So to do custom work is, it's not always something that's within our bandwidth as church communicators, people on a staff. And it's not just communications where this happens. This happens in all of the creative kind of expressions in the church. I think of this in the worship context. I mean, sure, I'm sure a lot of you would like to write your own music, have your own songs written from scratch that are specifically what you're trying to communicate. I mean, okay, we don't have time for that, but there was a season where I had a little bit more margin as a designer, and I built a font for the kids team. Like it was so great to be able to invest at that level. But you don't always have that margin. So this is a blast for me to be able to do this for churches when they have a project that they want to, send out and really invest in, invest in it with custom creation. That, that's not the only way you're investing in it. But okay, so we have one vine going one way. So now we have another vine that's kind of designed to go a different way. Let's see if I can weave this in a way that's not going to be too cumbersome. I'm going to go here to here, back over to here, and then back up. I think that might pull it off. Let's see here. I think we might have gotten it. Got a little bit too wide up here. Nice. All right. Digging it. Okay. All right. So now I'm going to want it to go, it always makes sense to go under first. So let's go, oh man, this is not good. Under. And then let's see if going over causes issues. Oh, wait. Over. I don't know. Part of me wants it to go under all that complexity, but let's see. I dig it. I think that works good. And then we're going to do another vine here. I got to be careful though. As I'm looking at this, I'm like, am I leaving any room for leaves? Big yikes. So this is a funny problem. You get tunnel vision, and now all of a sudden you're creating this piece that, I mean, sure, maybe it looks nice with the vines only, but you're losing sight of the fact that something else is coming. Something else needs to go in here. You need to have leaves. Oh, goodness. I don't know who's calling me, but man, I should have put this in maybe in airport mode or airplane mode. I don't know. Let's see what we got here. Okay, got some messages, making sure nothing's on fire. And making sure that the phone calls don't actually, matter. Who was that from? Scam likely. It don't matter. Okay. That's good. So we got a branch coming out there, and then we're going to need something. I actually don't know if we need an entire new branch here. I think what we could do is we could do a spin off here. Let me just sketch this out real quick. Spin off here. And then we can do a longer spin off here. And I think we're done. Okay. So now one of the things I'm going to turn off the back layer here, the inserted image. Okay, so there's the vine work that we've created. I dig it. We got a little bit of a blank spot down here, but I think that'll be great for leaves and whatever complexity we decide to go with there. Over here, same thing, a blank spot and a blank spot and a blank spot. I'll draw all of them here. I'm feeling good about that. All right, so then we're going to do another pass. Let me turn on this, the color here, and then I'm actually going to turn off the thirds so that we can get a good sense. Yeah, I'm digging that. This is turning out maybe better than I was worried that it would turn out. So this is really just this is the foundational layer that we're working off of. So I'm going to go back through here, and I'm going to clean up these branches where I didn't trim out the right, the little parts. So we're going to trim that out for now, and switch tools. There we go. Really need to adjust that feature. Do we like that? I think I like it better when it comes down more like that. And then this goes here. Yeah. So this is what the process of cleaning this stuff up looks like, is it's making sure everything goes the way that you are wanting to have it go. This is where you control those little elements. What's interesting, so one of the problems that you have when you can zoom in, this is an interesting problem working digitally versus on paper. When you zoom in, you can get lost in the details. So I can go in here and I could zoom in and be like, man, I want this to be a rounded edge so it looks like a clipped, clipping. And then I want this to be nice and perfect here. I don't know if anybody's going to see that. So let's try it, and we'll zoom out. Yeah, I guess so. I think that could work. So sometimes you put yourself in a position where you've just invested a lot of time managing details that literally no one will be able to see. But in this case, I think it works enough. So we're going to keep doing it. Because I do like the little piece that it adds. But now we'll see. I mean, some of these are tiny. Yep, I think that'll work. Get that angle a little bit steeper there. Sufficient. I don't love how this one looks. So one of the tendencies that I'm noticing I have is for some of these branches to kind of like balloon in parts. And so I don't want that. Man, I'm having a hard time fixing this one. Okay, so we're going to erase it entirely. Sometimes redoing is better than trying to refine. All right, so we got this. Take it real careful. Got it. Okay, that feels way better. All right, excellent. And then I'm going to adjust that a touch. Okay, that feels good. Those look good. I'm going to adjust this guy a little bit because the vine feels like it's behaving a little bit weird. I want it to be a swoosh to the connection. I do like that, how that connects there though, but we can always recreate that. So there we go. All right. This curve now needs to change so that it matches what's going on at the rest of that vine. Okay. I think I'm getting into the micro details that won't be noticed as I'm doing this. I'm like, wait a minute. Usually when you spend this much time in one area, it's a bad sign. So let me zoom out a little bit here. I think we're okay. I don't really like how that vine looks. It's a little bit wider. Let's see if I can trim it down a little bit. Yeah, that's all right. It's still, so you can see that little balloon. I don't know if you could tell that is happening. But there we go. Okay, feeling a little bit better about that. Okay. All right. I think we're pretty good on that one. We're going to keep going up here. And then we got this guy right there. I'm going to clean that up. All right. So I think we got that section dialed. This section, it looks like I did quite a bit of it as it came up, which future self is pleased with the decision making of past self. I don't like how this guy's coming out at the same time here. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to erase this one. I'm going to complete this vine, and then I'm going to move this one up. So it's happening a little bit further up in the branch. I like making sure that it's clear that it's like an offshoot of it. And I don't feel like that previous look was quite as, I don't know. I like how this looks better. There you go. This is where, this is the phase of a project where you're really leaning on your instincts. And this is what you develop your artistic sensibilities for, is to make these judgment calls. These are little judgment calls that may seem inconsequential to the final piece, but they are actually where, I don't know if this is the right language. This is how I describe it. This is where the soul of a piece lives. It lives in the attention to detail in the small things. It lives in what it is that you're spending your time refining and adjusting. These are the little things that make the difference in a piece, in my opinion. And so when you don't have the time to pay attention to these details, you get a piece that tends to be a little bit more soulless and a little bit less kind of crafted, is kind of how I look at it. This is also the problem with too formulaic of a solution. A lot of times people want to standardize or make kind of a formulaic approach to a piece. It's not going to yield good work. It just isn't. This is always the tension of the business mindset and the creative mindset. A formalized system in the process of illustration usually leads to stale and lifeless work. And so that doesn't mean that there can't be some systematic elements of what you do, but you can't systematize an entire piece without stealing the soul of the work. And I will die on that hill. That is to me, it goes so much deeper than just the work itself and like the efficiency of the process. This is the nature of creation. A part of you is in the work that you're creating. That doesn't mean that your work defines your identity, but it does mean that you, as the artist, are contributing. You're leaving something in the work itself. And so it's tricky because when we get critique or when people say, I don't like your work, there's a personal side of that we wrestle with, I think, as creatives. We probably do. We should, I think, in a way. But we shouldn't be defined by the work that we put out. That's not holistically who we are in Christ. That's not what we've been made to be. Our identity is in the fact that we're created in the image of God. God is creative. The decision for us to be created was intentional. It was, let us create man in our image. That was the conversation that happened. And so there's an intentionality to that decision. And that means that the attributes that we have as creators ourselves come from being created in the image of God. God created the heavens and the earth. There's a part of this, when I look at God's creation and I look at the details, I look at the subtle things, I think this is where the biological sciences are so intriguing as they study the natural world. It's incredible the level of detail that exists in the world. I'm always completely captivated by the fact that there are so many trees created, like so many different types of trees. Like there's a birch tree. Okay. There's a pine tree. There's a maple tree. There's a walnut tree. There are trees that produce fruit. Like, it's so cool. In barbecue, the different woods from different trees give you a totally different taste. Mesquite is really strong and sometimes oppressive. Not everybody likes mesquite. Hickory is very mellow and smooth. Most people like hickory. That's what most barbecue is smoked with, is hickory. Pork does really well with apple or cherry, fruit woods, pecan. Like, That's crazy. All of those details. I think that's amazing. So to me, those little details existing in the world around me also motivate me to pay attention to the little details in the work that I'm creating, because I want to do work that is good work, but let me see if we can get that curve. There we go. I think as I lean into the creative work, as I lean into my work at that level, I find that I produce better work, but I also find that there's a soul and a character and a charm to the work that I produce. That if I don't lean in at that level, I'm not producing the same caliber of work. So that's kind of where that all goes back to me. So there you go. There's our abstract conversation about the nature of being creative in the midst of this illustration. Okay. Let's see. I feel like this needs to be just a touch thinner. Kind of lost my line there at the end. So what I'm doing here to refine these lines is I'm giving myself a thicker line to then go back through with my eraser brush. So again, remember using the same brush with my active painting brush and eraser. And then what it's letting me do is it's letting me move things over just enough to where I need them to be moved over. And so it's giving me that flexibility to shape the line the way that I want it to be shaped. And then one of the things we're going to do here is we're going to have a shadow layer at some point, and that shadow layer is really going to help kick up the difference, the depth between these different, the way that the branches are going. This branch shouldn't get thicker there. So we're just going through and doing these little refinements to make sure that everything feels good. It'll be from a distance. That's how we're going to view it. We're not going to view it up close. But this will make that distanced view, or the view from afar, feel a lot better. Like, these enhancements will be noticeable. They'll come through. And that's always the thing you're wrestling with, is am I paying too much attention to the details that are so small that no one will pay attention to them. No one will notice them. In some cases, yes, you can get lost in that, like I was talking about with zooming in too far and refining too much in a little area. But I will also say that when you pay attention to those types of details, you are establishing, there's something that is visible in that attention to detail over a wider illustration. And so it does come through. It doesn't always come through in the sense of like, I can see that every branch is joined by the same type of thing. That may not be the case, but as you look at it from a broader perspective, you will absolutely have this response from the viewer that says like, oh yeah, it feels right. And so a lot of times I've found that when people will look at an illustration or a design or any piece of visual communication, the people that don't have the language, oftentimes the people who are not creative executors, that are not artists themselves, they haven't learned a trade of some sort, they'll look at it and they'll say it just feels right. Like, oh yeah, that feels good. And so it gets really abstract. Sometimes for the creative, it gets frustrating because like, what does that mean? It doesn't feel good. What do you mean it doesn't feel right? We'll hear things all the time. Make it pop. Make it, whatever. Give me more oomph. and what they're saying all of the details don't feel right. All of the details aren't working. There's something that's not good about what is happening here. It's not refined enough. It's not polished enough. It's not thought through enough. It's not consistent enough. That's really what they're saying without knowing the vocabulary to be able to pinpoint what it is. And so a lot of times people get frustrated because they get client feedback that's not helpful. Well, really what they're getting is they're getting the feel, but they don't know how to translate. When a client says it just feels this way, or I don't like this thing, you need to be able to translate what the client's actually saying. And so a lot of times that comes from asking questions. But in this case, if somebody looks at this piece and they're like, it doesn't feel right, in my mind, I immediately say, okay, I need to ask some exploratory questions to say, okay, what doesn't feel right about it? And so I'll ask it. I'll say, okay, well, so let's talk about that. What is it that doesn't feel right to you? And they'll say, I don't know. It just looks like a bunch of branches. Okay. So talk to me, like, do the branches not look right? Do the branches look like the proportions aren't right? Do the branches look like they're not growing out of each other? Tell me about what you mean. And then let's say it gets to the point where it's like, well, they look like branches until I get to the end, and then it looks like they're these tubes. It's like, oh, that's a really good observation. So now as I'm taking a look back, I see, I'm gonna highlight these here with a different color just to make this part of the conversation easier. So I see these tubes. Oh, that one's not finished yet. So I see these end caps on these vines. The question that I need to ask myself, and actually, feel free to chime in the chat because I'd love your opinion on this too. Does adding these end caps help us or hurt us? So the concept is that I want these to feel like clipped branches. That's kind of what I'm going for here. I don't know why I'm going for that. Actually, as I said that out loud, why would somebody be pruning these branches? We're not talking about that at all biblically or, in any of the messages. It's probably because I don't feel like I know how to resolve the end of a branch, and I don't want to get into the, squiggly things like the little pigtails or the, I don't want the branch to just go to a tip, I don't think. So I don't really know how to resolve these branches, actually, now that I think about it. So does resolving them with the rounded part work? Should it just be you have a branch and it goes to... I don't know. So I'm running a little bit into, I don't really know how to draw that, or I don't know what I want it to be. So my question really becomes, does it make it look like strands of pasta? Does it make it look like they're not branches anymore? Now, I know how I'm going to resolve this most likely. I'm going to cover them, at least in the branch work that I can cover it. So I can't cover it in the Good Friday stuff. So I can hide the fact that I don't know what I'm doing. You know what I mean? I can hide the fact that I don't really know the best way to resolve the branch. I think I can make this work by coloring it a different color. So one of the ways that I typically will draw, like, let's say like a log, I'm going to skip ahead here a little bit, and I'm going to draw some, I'm going to color some stuff to see if I can resolve this okay. Let's say I'm working with a brown, more in the orange, and I'm going to go, I think I'm probably actually going to go with like a gray brown on these dead branches. So this is what my mind is thinking when it comes to my branches. They're going to be more brown and like dead. And then I'm going to go with a more of a yellowish, like a tan on the inside. Actually, that should be back to the browns, but I want it to be muted. So more like here. So I'm going to go with a lighter brown or tan in the middle. So I think that resolves it fine. That takes it away from a pasta tube and makes it feel like a branch that's been clipped or that's stopped growing or stunted or whatever. So I think that solves it. So I feel good about it again. But back to what we were talking about in terms of what a client talks about, what a client will say. A client won't tell you, I mean, maybe they'll tell you it looks like a pasta tube, I don't know. If somebody said, hey, your drawing looks like a bunch of pasta tubes, it's like, well, I don't know if I should be offended by that or not. Well, I shouldn't be, because that's what it looks like to them. But what it's doing is it's revealing a problem that I need to address as the artist, as the one creating this piece. I don't want this to look like pasta tubes. I want it to look like vines. So what can I do to help it look more like vines? I need to take that abstract feedback and I need to translate it into actionable feedback. And I think sometimes we get frustrated as creatives because we expect the client to be able to come to us with resolved language for the problem. That is an unfair expectation if we put that on our clients. Bottom line, you're not going to have a client that is going to be able to give you refined critique language. Ministry leaders aren't going to have that. Pastors aren't going to have that. If you work with client work, The client you work with isn't going to have that language. They're just not going to have it. They haven't been trained to have that language. And so a big part of what you're doing as the creative in the room is you're leading them to that information. You're leading them to that insight. That's a part of what your job is to pull that out of them. And so as you grow in your ability to help others critique your work intelligently, you'll get less and less of that frustration. You'll still have the initial comment, "Hey man, what's up with all the pasta tubes?" All right, well, tell me what you mean by that. I've had conversations where people will give me incredibly helpful insights by starting with, "These are pasta tubes." And I've had feedback where people give me not helpful content or not helpful feedback. And it's like, I'll push them on it and be like, "Okay, well, tell me what you mean by pasta tubes." "I don't know. I mean, I don't agree with that anymore." They'll backpedal. Well, you got to push them on it. Because I need to understand what you're saying. Obviously you have something in mind that you're trying to get at. I need to know what that is. So then I can make the decision as the creative. Do I apply this or do I not apply this? That's the question that you have to navigate. Do I take this feedback? Do I accept it? Do I use this to apply to my work and then make my work better? Or is this not helpful feedback, so I don't need to apply it to my work? Those are the things that you're trying to navigate when people are giving you feedback. I need to take a sip here. All right. I think we have our vines done. Nope, we don't. Missed a spot. Oh yeah, I haven't gone through. Oh, yeah. I still got a couple more to clean up here. Okay, almost there. We are almost there. So as I'm looking at the clock, I have a feeling that we're going to wrap the stream here by wrapping up the vines. We're going to complete the vines, and then I'm going to take a break for lunch. I don't know where you're watching from. I'm streaming from the East Coast. It is 12:45 here. If you're on the West Coast, you are starting your Friday. Hopefully this was an enjoyable experience for you guys to jump on here and participate in the creation of this, at least this part of it. From here, what I'm going to be doing is really the bulk of the graphic is done at this point. Where we're going to go from here is we're going to go to some detail work. I'm going to add palm fronds on the left somehow. I'm going to add flowers and leaves and stuff on the right. And then I'm going to add some like texture to the middle portion. I'm going to add, I think of there's a plant that I loved when we were living in the desert. I remember seeing it in Joshua Tree, and it had this real thick bark to it. I think it was actually called Crown of Thorns or Jerusalem Thorns or something like that. I forget the specific name of it. But it had these big thorns. I'm not going to add thorns on here. I know that that's a very like obvious thing to do for a Good Friday graphic. I'm actually going to avoid that intentionally because I'm just not going to go with that kind of look and feel. I want this to be representative more of death than the specifics of the Crown of Thorns. So that's just a decision that I'm making in the process of creating this graphic. So that's what I'm going to try to do here. And then I'm going to add some of those elements and then add color. And then that's pretty much it. This isn't going to be as complex visually of a graphic as of some as compared to some of the other ones that I've done in the series where I've had, we're drawing the Cascade Mountains, we're drawing, different environments and stuff like that. But I think we're in a pretty good place. So the next step here is going to be to add some of those layers of the leaves, the flowers, that kind of stuff on top. And then we'll get to coloring across the 2 or 3 layers that'll be. And then I think that'll be pretty much a wrap. Then we're going to have to navigate what are we going to do here when it comes to the background graphics for PowerPoint, all that kind of stuff. But that's the nature of the beast when it comes to designing a series graphic. It is about the graphic, but it's also about the supporting elements that come. So for those of you that have been a part of this, the stream, that have been joining along, or if you're watching it on demand after the fact, thanks for coming along with me on this road. Hopefully there were some helpful insights that you got as you were watching the process of this being built out, some of the things that go into the thought process, some of the ways that you can think about it. a little promo plug here. I just wrapped the launch of a class. It was a course that was being sold a while back, but it's free now. It's one of the playlists on the YouTube channel. So check it out on the YouTube channel. It's basically the foundations of graphic design and the principles that you'll need as a graphic designer serving in your church. So if that's helpful for you, if you find yourself trying to figure out what do I do here, part of that is actually how to design an effective series graphic. So hopefully that's a helpful element for you. If that's a piece of why you are joining the stream, is like, I got to figure out my series graphic. That's great. There is a video that can help you do that. And I see that there are some of you who are just joining the stream right now. We're just wrapping up, going to take a break here for lunch, but appreciate those of you who have joined in. I may actually go live later this afternoon. And so if you have a longer day, part of what I'm trying to figure out with these streams is what are the time windows that are the best windows for people to jump in. I don't want you to have to watch over lunch. I want you to have this either in the background or, kind of on a side screen as you're designing stuff so that we can, kind of go back and forth and chat through some of the things you're wrestling with as a church communicator, or learn some things on how to build an illustration. So I'll probably be going live later this afternoon. And so if that's a better time window for you, I'd love to have you join me then. But thank you for joining me, and we will see you shortly here in the next